to the Wandering Creatives podcast. I'm your host, Allie, and joining me on today's episode is the founder of Puka Puka Creative, Leah Jackson. Thanks so much for joining me.
Allie, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Woohoo!
Woohoo! Puka Puka in the house.
Yes, we love it. I love that you said it correctly, because usually people are like, they don't know how to say puka correctly, so they always ask me how to say it. So you nailed it.
Oh, yeah. As a former lifeguard of 7 years, I've spent many of my days wearing puka.
Those puka shells.
All the puka shell necklaces. Yes. So
yeah.
It's got a soft spot in my heart for puka shells.
Same.
So Leah's a creator and producer, and your specialties really lie in storytelling and audio production, and really working with brands and podcasters to bring their stories to life. You've really taken that passion for storytelling. And last year in 2020, you founded Puka Puka Creative. And it's a creative audio studio, and you produce podcasts for brands, which is badass.
Yes. Yeah. I've kind of had a long history of, marketing and branding and storytelling. And I got into the podcasting game, but I had an opportunity in 2020 to help a small startup company produce their podcast. And man, as soon as I started producing, and I call myself a predator producer / editor. As soon as I got into the creation process of producing a podcast, I just fell in love with it. I started out actually in radio in the early 90s, way back in the day. And yeah, when I was on this project, I kind of had this duality of just being really inspired about creating this kind of content, but then also very nostalgic of starting out in my career in radio and the just possibilities, right? And what you can do in the theater of the mind and character building and story building. There's so much that goes into podcasting and creating, engaging and compelling content. And yeah, I was really, really lucky to get this project. And then actually my boss, the CEO of the company, he was like, Leah, you should really start your own company and do this as a business. And I'm like, God, that's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that before? And he's like a serial entrepreneur. So of course, he would be the one to tell me and to encourage me to do that. But yeah, I've spent kind of the majority of this year really building out my plan. And it's a wild ride starting your own business, as you know. And
yes.
It's kind of a lot of emotions really tied to that, right? Feelings of being very overwhelmed and not know what I'm doing to, the next day I'm like full steam ahead. I know what my plan is. I know what my tasks are, and I'm superwoman, and I'm just so aligned with everything that I'm trying to do. And then the next day I'm kind of discouraged and whatnot. And I think that's just, that's just a founder's journey. So
yes, yeah. the ups and downs of starting your own business for sure. It's days where you're on point, and then the next day you've used all of your energy, and it's like a rest day.
And honestly, I think what's been beneficial is kind of in the last couple of months as I'm building things, I actually haven't had a project that I've been actively working on. I've been more in the business development sales side of kind of trying to come up with different ideas and develop those and pitch those and do some pilots with different brands. So that's kind of the stage I'm in now, but it's really given me the time and space to have some breathing room, I think we're in a day and age now, especially with founders and entrepreneurs, that the pressures are a lot different. And I think I feel okay to take some time for myself. And if I need to take a nap, if I need some, mental space and recovery, if I'm having just a bad day, I go to the beach. Like, it's okay. There's always, hopefully there's a, the next day, hopefully there's a tomorrow, but I don't know. I think especially right now in this last 16 months, we just have to be more kind to ourselves. And there's always just that stigma of a founder entrepreneur, like working 18-hour days and not getting any sleep. And I feel like I can be successful in what I'm doing without that. Right. So
yeah, and that's something I think is kind of ingrained in us early on in our kind of professional careers, whatever jobs we may have that are maybe not, of our own making. It's you're almost solely dedicated to just working, and taking time for yourself is almost frowned upon, I think, in a lot of career areas. So it's definitely nice to be able to do that as a founder. And I think there's also a little bit of like a mind fuck that happens when you go from a corporate job into working for yourself, where you kind of have to reset that you're not lazy or you're not like working hard enough when you do that, like when you take a day for yourself, because it's easy to be like, oh, well, I'm just lazy because I'm not spending every hour of every day working on my own business. So you gotta have to kind of reset that thought process and how you view kind of your work process, which is something that's really interesting, I think, when we do make that transition from 9 to 5 to creative entrepreneur.
Right. Yeah. I know it's interesting time to be in a creative industry or, be a creative person, because we're so, like you said, and it's ingrained in our DNA that we have to be creating all the time, productive all the time. Like, I think we're redefining what productivity looks like. And I think what I love about being quote unquote, and then a creative person, a creative thinker, a creative entrepreneur is I'm creating all the time. Mm-hmm. And if I need that space to go to the beach, take a breather, I'm always thinking about my business, of course, but I'm not sitting at a desk every day, like grinding it and hustling it out, like feeling that burnout experience. And so I think it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because it's like you have this creative mind and it's always going. Mm-hmm. And it's like so great, because even at the beach, that's an inspiring place for me. I live in San Diego, and I actually moved to San Diego from San Francisco in March of this year. And that was one of the reasons why I want to be close to the beach. That is like one of the most inspiring places for me to think, to just be. And when my mind is clear, I'm not stressed, ideas just come to me. And it's being okay with that and honoring that, those moments. So those are really important as an entrepreneur, I feel like, in this day and age.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really excited because you kind of touched on what you said, kind of like brought this to mind, but I'm excited to talk to you about creativity and kind of how you got started in your business, because oftentimes on this podcast, when we talk about creativity, we're referring to like makers, people who are artists or have like some type of physical product that they're selling. And so I'm excited to talk to someone who is creative in another way, because, creativity takes on all forms, and including audio. Like, I'm a huge music fan, and I get a lot of my inspiration from music and other podcasts. And so I'm just really interested in kind of tapping into your creativity and kind of seeing how that works for you, especially in an audio production, storytelling type of way. We're all about storytelling.
Yeah, totally.
And
then,
has to be. Yes, and building a brand, because storytelling is vital to building your brand and connecting with your audience. So excited to dig into that a little more and kind of pick your brain on creativity.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like I said, I started out in radio in the early 90s. I was at the Art Institute of Seattle in the music and video business like class, or I should say courses. Like right out of high school, I knew I wanted to be in music. I just didn't know which route to really take. And so in college, I got an internship at a radio station, Heritage Radio, like top 40 radio station. And it was basically like my dream internship. I was producing radio shows, helping street team, like doing everything, cool. I'm like, just an unpaid intern back in the day. And, getting to be at a Heritage radio station was pretty incredible, right? When I was in college. But I found that my passion was music marketing, music programming is kind of what they called it in radio, but really just, music branding and music DJing, back in the day, it's really what you're doing is, you're selecting music for a specific audience. And then I got into television. I actually got an amazing opportunity kind of towards the end of the 90s working at VH1. And so I kind of went to the music programming side in television, and then went on to do music programming in the digital space in kind of the early 2000s. So all of it really just like encompassed, being in the music industry and just absolutely having this huge passion for music and marketing and branding. And then the recession hit, and I was like years of not being able to find a job in the music industry.
Oh my gosh.
And I had moved to San Francisco in 2005. And that was kind of still when the second bubble was about to burst in San Francisco. And I was going through some pretty dark times in my life around that time. Had a lot of death in my life, and was kind of coping with that. And I found DJing as a source that it really just saved my life. I mean, at the end of the day, I went through a lot of loss in a short amount of time. And I was really trying to find myself after that. I was really trying to find kind of what my identity was without, these major players in my life. And I just deep dive right into DJing because it fueled this creativity that I never really had before. And I never really felt before. And DJing was like my life for so long. And my dream was to be a full-time DJ. And I did that, pretty much from like 2008 until 2018 for about 10 years.
Wow.
Traveled the world, to be a DJ was incredible.
Turning to music and just kind of throwing yourself into it and finding that passion. And yeah, I can definitely relate. Like music is definitely like,
it's a healer. Music is a form of healing, for so many people. And, I'm very, very grateful for that outlet, right? To be able to have that. A lot of people don't, and go through life and they don't have any sort of inspiration or any outlet to heal from. And so, I mean, I had 10 years of DJing pretty much as my life, and really heavily in San Francisco, and toured in Canada, kind of up the West Coast. I went to Europe. So I had this kind of audio background, like audio production. I was producing music, doing bootlegs and remixes and stuff, and collaborating with a lot of music producers. And I really love that aspect of it. But I feel like I kind of held back in the producing world because, as a lot of creatives do, if they're not great at something, they're not going to do it. Right. And so I got help. I mean, I worked with a lot of people. They kind of helped get ideas out for me. And that was a great outlet. And it was around kind of 2019 that I had a kind of a shift in my health and my life. And I really had to kind of rethink what I want to do with my life. And it needed to be centered around not being up all night long. I know as a DJ, I battle with multiple autoimmune diseases, and one which is called Hashimoto's, and that stress is a big trigger, and late nights really affect your circadian rhythm. And sleep mental health, it's all connected, right? So I was like, what am I going to do? Like, if I'm not doing music, I don't know what is going to drive me and inspire me. Like, I mean, I went through pretty much the majority of 2019, just really struggling to find my place and find some new inspiration and other things that I could create, right? I mean, when we're talking about creativity and inspiration, for me at least, has always come from one place. And so when I had to pivot, at least in my career, and find something completely different, that was really a struggle, like real struggle. Like, I did all these amazing things. I did a lot of marketing, experiential marketing, kind of my side hustle. I was DJing. So I've, had some good experience, but I didn't want to do events anymore and experiential marketing because the stress is just too much, And then I decided to take a job at a startup company in San Francisco. And I was a brand producer, basically a creative producer on the brand team. So essentially my job was kind of project managing creative campaigns. And those could be kind of internal campaigns or like external campaigns. Email, on the web, on social, that kind of stuff. And that gig was really challenging because I think for the first time, I had a role where I wasn't the creator and I wasn't making creative choices or ideating or creating something. I was working on a team of designers and brand managers, and I just felt a pretty major void in that role. And luckily, it was a good thing. It was a bad thing, but luckily I was laid off due to COVID in the spring of 2020. And then it led me into this great opportunity to produce this podcast. And here I am today. I have my own creative audio studio, and, it's just been what a crazy ride in this last 20 years.
Well, first off, DJing for 10 years, I feel like that is super impressive. I will be honest, don't know a whole lot about the DJing game, but I feel like when you can do it for 10 years, that's pretty impressive. I don't know if a lot of DJs do it for that long. Also, sounds like it was fun.
Just a little bit.
Just, traveling around, fully just being in your tunes all the time. Sounds amazing.
I think when you do something for so long and you're so passionate about it and you're 100,000,000% all the way in, it's really good to take a break and take a step back sometimes. And I felt like, for my health and for my sanity and for my financial future, instead of being a struggling artist,
Yes.
Now after, about a year and a half, 2 years, taking that break because of that, but also because of obviously COVID, I feel a lot more re-energized by making that decision and taking a step back and not forcing things, not forcing to try to be inspired by things that used to make me feel inspired or give me that excitement. And now I feel excited about it again,
Yeah.
And it's like awesome. It's like Michael Jordan when he retired, from basketball. He's like, I have nothing else to achieve. I've done everything I've set my mind to do. And then, 18 months later, he's ready again. He fell in love with basketball again, I was like, oh, so not
sometimes you got to
Michael Jordan.
The Michael Jordan of podcast producing.
I was such a big fan always. So
sometimes you got to step back, refocus, reevaluate, and kind of, why did you fall in love with it in the first place? And
do you know what goes great with listening to podcasts? If you said a warm drink, you're absolutely right. Just imagine you're sitting back, you're listening to your favorite podcast, all while holding a nice, cute-ass mug in your hand with your favorite hot beverage in it. If you're wondering, where can I get a mug like that? Well, you're in luck. you can swing by the Coos Creations Cute Coffee and Tea Mugs Etsy shop. They've got everything from enamel coffee cups to travel mugs, all featuring adorable original artwork. Head over to etsy.com/shop/Coots Creations and use promo code WANDER for 10% off any mug.
I wanted to ask, between DJing and starting Puka Puka Creative, did you have a way to kind of like refocus and kind of explore what you were interested in, or did you kind of just go with the flow and end up, where you are through the various jobs that you kind of worked on?
Yeah, I've definitely been journaling a lot for the last 12 years or so. That's been a huge, writing has, definitely been an outlet for healing and just get things out of my head. And I think my mindset at the time was just, I had to try something. I had to try something different, and being open to what was going to come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I love design. I'm a self-trained designer myself. I wouldn't call myself a great designer, but I just love it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, well, let's try that. I'm not a trained designer, but I can work and learn with other designers, and that can be an inspiring thing. And obviously I, had the experience of it, and, I wanted to be the designer, for things. But, I think it was just really I had to just pick something, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to make a decision sometimes. I know I'm not going to like that. No, that's not going to work for me. You already have your mind made up, right? I was in a financial position where I had to make a choice, and I had to make a decision for myself. And luckily, even though that wasn't the role for me, I worked with an incredible team, and I learned a lot from them. Mm-hmm. And I'm taking all that I learned from them into my branding, into my, positioning of my company, because I learned so much about branding and kind of positioning in a marketplace. And so it's all lessons, right? At the end of the day.
It's funny you say that you like to design, because likewise, it's almost like I have too many things that you enjoy, and it's hard to pick one. But
yes.
But even when it comes to designing, I wasn't surprised when you said that, really, because I'm like, well, it's another way of storytelling. It all kind of works together to tell the overall story, right? You can combine everything, the visual, the sound, the everything. So yeah, when you said that, I was like, yeah, that's spot on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah. Design is a huge part of that as well. So the catalyst of you starting Puka Puka Creative was really kind of you figuring out kind of what your next move is and what you really enjoyed. And it's that production and that branding and that storytelling aspect of it and the marketing. I'd really love to hear more about how you, one, came up with the name Puka Puka Creative. Where did that come from? And what it was like fully deciding to go in and to start your business in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
Yes.
So many positive and negatives, I feel like. I guess I'll start with the catalyst and the reasons why I started my own creative studio. Last year, obviously, we endured just unmentionable things. And I was working on the podcast project with a small startup, as I mentioned. And I just really, honestly, it just came out of me finally started to feel inspired and creative again. I think the 9 months that I was in my previous job, where I was just not happy and not feeling creatively, fulfilled. When I started podcasting and working with companies and kind of being a consultant, I just felt excited again. And I just had so much fun. And so I was like, well, I'm going to give this a shot. This is what I want to do. I have connections. I have a network. I'm creative. I can do these things. I know what I'm good at. I don't know what I'm not good at. I think, being older, and I'm 45, I've learned a lot about what to do, what not to do. And I've learned from a lot of people, a lot of successful people, about what to do, what not to do. So that was really the spark, and I was like, I really love creating something new. And sometimes I get really bored easily and I try to do all these different things. Yeah. And I think it was just a really good time just to kind of keep my attention very focused on doing this one thing and being successful at it. And I'm very new, but like I said before, I've had a lot of experience in audio that I felt like I can do this. Like I believe in what I can do and my, what value I bring to people and companies. I could believe I can help people and companies succeed with their goals and what they want to do. And I'll get to the name in a second, but really, as I was kind of in those last couple of months, really just developing, like, what is it, what I want to be? What is Puka Puka Creative? I felt like it was really important for me to build a company that represented something of value and was purposeful. I'm a queer woman. That's how I identify. Pronouns she, her. We didn't say that in the beginning, but, I started talking with a lot of companies that were LGBTQ plus brands. And I felt like a really great opportunity to serve this community that I've been in for so long within nightlife and within DJing, that this is what my passion is. I want to serve these brands and these companies to build these strong storylines and really elevate these voices out into the world. So kind of what I've been really developing is this mission for my company around serving the LGBTQ plus minority and allied businesses. And I think that's where I'm going to be different. And that's where I'm going to kind of stand out. And thank God we're in a society in the media and on social media that, our voices matter, our stories matter. And I want to be I really want to be a part of helping individuals, it could be creatives, it could be influencers, share their stories. So that's really kind of what Puka Puka is. And the name actually has a long history because I did, when I was trying to come up with names for my business, I was like, I just don't want it to be this corporate thing. Like I'm a creative studio. Like I want it to be something light and energizing. And the name in Hawaiian means kind of whole in heaven is one of the meanings. Puka meaning whole and Lani meaning heaven. And my grandparents actually, they retired to the town of Pukalani in Maui. So in the late 70s, they built their retirement home upcountry Maui. And the name just really always stuck with me. And I named my French bulldog Pukalani because she's just my little hole in heaven, she's just this little butterball. Adorable. And so it was kind of just an easy, I really love the name Puka. There was already a Puka Creative out there that I was like, okay, shoot, can't use that. So I was like, well, I always call her Puka Puka. So let's just do Puka Puka Creative. It's original. It's really means, for me, just the symbol of energy and light and inspiration. And folks that are listening can look at the logo for us and hopefully that kind of embodies what Puka is. But yeah, I wanted something that was really close to me. Some people don't really get it, but that's okay. It's unique to me and my history and my family. I spent a lot of time in Hawaii and Maui growing up. And yeah, so I felt like, okay, people will remember that. They might not be able to pronounce it, but they'll remember that.
It sticks out. It's funny because I was checking out your website and I was looking at everything and I was like, yes, this is when you look at, you get a good vibe. Or at least I did. I was I got a real good vibe about this. And I was also, I'm glad that you mentioned part of your mission or your goal is kind of to elevate queer voices. I'm also a member of the queer community and LGBTQ community. Yes. And
my hand is raising the roof. Raise the roof. Hey, love it.
So I really appreciate that. And it was actually something that stuck out to me when I was looking at your website, because you have, you have that in there, and you mention it. And personally, I don't see a lot of that, like websites I go to and whatnot. Maybe I'm just on the wrong websites, but maybe. I appreciated it. I was like, this is nice. And like I said, I got a good vibe from your website. And Puka Puka is definitely like very fitting, I feel. So it's and it sticks with you. How can you forget it?
Yeah. I mean, I think podcasting, as you know, has just blown the fuck up in this last 5 years, right? Like when I was doing a lot of research and starting the company, I mean, there's so much competition. There's so many different levels of audio studios and podcasting, coaching and partners and audio production.
Yes.
And I think my experience of working with this startup company was a great experience, and I love the team, and this is nothing against, what their business was, but I didn't feel connected to, the discussion. I didn't feel like it was meaningful for me. And I think for any entrepreneur or founder that's trying to find their way, and obviously I haven't found my way completely, but I think I'm on my way, is you have to stay true to who you are. And know who you are is, I think, the hardest, road to kind of, I guess I wouldn't say road, but, it's the hardest question to answer for yourself. And I think with age gets a little easier, but I think that just felt good, like I could be any audio production studio and serving a lot of tech companies. And I feel like I still will. That's why in our mission, it's LGBTQ plus minority and ally companies, because there are a lot of purpose-driven and value-driven tech companies out there. But I think that I learned was, how do I define this company around what my values and what my purpose really is? And that feels good to me. And I think that's just a really important part of branding yourself in the market too. Like, I'm different. I want to be different. I don't want to be another creative studio, another production house. Like, I want to serve specific people that I connect with.
It's wonderful. Like, it really is to know kind of like what your purpose is and who you want to focus on and who you want to help get their voices out. And definitely a huge part of being an entrepreneur is figuring out those things. Who is your audience? Who do you want to support? How do you want to support them? Kind of what are your goals and your missions? I think as creatives, it's easy for us to maybe dive in full force without maybe thinking about those things, because we get caught up in kind of the making process, maybe more than like really thinking about I don't want to say those are like full business things, but you know what I mean? Like it's maybe we think less about branding ourselves and more about creating. So it can be difficult sometimes, but I definitely agree that kind of like knowing what purpose you have and who you want to kind of lift with your creativity is a super important aspect of being a creative.
This episode of the Wandering Creatives podcast is sponsored by Coots Creations, branding and marketing for creatives by creatives. Coots Creations serves small businesses, entrepreneurs, and creatives throughout the country with branding, marketing, and social media management. We accomplish this by creating unique graphics, a cohesive visual brand, and content that tells your brand's story and builds trust with your customers. Visit cootscreations.com and book your free consultation today.
As a podcaster and creative, storytelling is super vital, and we've kind of touched on that a little bit already. And I don't think we can say it enough how important it is. We're using our voices, our art, our music, or, whatever method to create and to share our stories. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on kind of how important that creativity and storytelling ability is when it comes to kind of marketing and building your brand.
Yeah. I mean, I chose this, I chose to have a creative audio studio because I mean, I believe in the power of audio. I believe in the power of storytelling. But, take a step back from that is like really looking at the landscape. We're consumed with this overabundance of content, just things flying around us all the time. I feel like, in going back to our conversation around music and the power of that and the power of audio, brands have the biggest opportunity to tell their story in a real authentic way through audio experiences. And I'm not just talking, podcasts. There could be other experiences outside of a podcast that, a brand could create. But if we're talking about, really building trust and loyalty with your customers or your audience that you're trying to serve, there is no better way, in my opinion, there is no better way to do it in a budget friendly, way. Also, you look at, podcasting in a production budget compared to a video production budget. Mm-hmm. And, the return on investment that, a company would get from podcasting versus video. Video is still an important way to serve people and to entertain and to market. But there's just something about this intimacy that you get in podcasting that if you're doing it right, you don't have to sell anything. You're just literally telling your story. Mm-hmm. And, the thing that kind of tying it back to, my mission is like, has to be an authentic voice there, like people are going to see through your bullshit really easily now more than ever, I feel like. Right. And I especially feel that, with brands that are really saying or talking the talk around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to work with those brands that are actually taking action. That's meaningful to me. And that's going to hold a deeper connection with, company's audience when they're actually telling real stories, whether it's, their internal employees or their external customers. I mean, there's so many benefits. Obviously, we could probably talk about this for another hour. Yeah. Right. But I think at the end of the day, audio builds trust and it builds loyalty if you're doing it the right way, of course. Right. And brands you can do that in such a more affordable and a lot easier way than you can, in other mediums. So it's an exciting place to be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I have 3 podcasts at this point. I might have a podcasting problem, but
hashtag podcast problem. Yeah,
podcast problems.
Maybe you're in a podcast addict.
Yeah, I might be. Yeah. I mean, but because I listen to podcasts almost nonstop throughout my day, and it is like you were saying, there is not this authenticity to podcasting that can be lacking in other forms like video or just like on Instagram to do, like, for an example, just photos, right? Like a lot of what you're seeing is not what's actually going on. And personally, the thing I like the most, what I enjoy about podcasting is I can be more open through podcasting. Like I have a hard time expressing emotions just like on the daily, but there's something about sitting down, with a mic and just kind of like opening up and like sharing those stories that I can do through podcasting that I can't do normally. Mm-hmm. So yeah, everything you're saying about like the authenticity and kind of you're finding your community, you're building your community, and that trust, which is so important when you're building anything. Like it really comes down to how much trust you have built in your audience and your community. Yeah, like I don't know. I'm like, podcasting, man.
Yeah. Well, I'll share like an interesting like data point that I always reference because I think we're just in a more interesting time. I mean, I started in radio 20 years ago, right? Been in marketing for 20 years. This is actually from the Small Business Trends report, but they say that 71% of consumers prefer buying from companies aligned with their values. And you look at a statistic like that and you say, wow, like this is such a great opportunity. Like we're going back, going back to our conversation around like building a business or a company around your values and around a purpose and a mission, right? And you are actually going to be more successful by doing that as a business owner or an entrepreneur, and kind of starting out at the gate with a value to who you're serving. Mm-hmm. And I always just love to talk about that because now I don't know what the percentage was 5-10 years ago, but I feel like more and more and more because of social media and because of that lack of authenticity and, the fake news and just all that content that just is not clicking with people. The messages and the marketing that is actually working, it really all centers around that value, that a company is trying to provide for as a service or as a product to their customers. Right. So, yeah. So I thought I always just like to talk about that because a lot of people, I think it makes me better understand like what I'm trying to do, It also really helped me just to get to that point of like, okay, I could just be another production company. I could just be another creative studio, like, working with small and medium-sized businesses. I'm like, well, that's just kind of boring, like that's not going to like fuel my fire. And that's not going to have me align with, my clients. And that's just really important to me. And I feel like I'm going to have actually more opportunity by branding my company in a way that is creative and that is going to align with, with these communities.
And just, I feel like also just having more authentic and fulfilling relationships and experiences through that whole process as well. And you are doing something that's meaningful to you and to the community that you want to serve. It becomes less of a job and more of something that you can truly kind of enjoy and like throw your whole self into, which I think is also important. Do you have any advice for folks that are kind of looking to engage with their audience and kind of express their values and their purpose through social media? Or, maybe they're thinking about, is podcasting or audio a good way for me to do that?
Yeah. I mean, your last question around, is audio a good opportunity for everybody? I like to tell clients that I'm either potentially going to work with or want to work with is really looking at all the different content that, they have produced in the past or currently. Is there a story there? Is there a story to tell that's going to be entertaining? It's going to be unique. Like you're not just going to have another interview-based podcast about B2B marketing, like the podcast space has grown, and I know a lot of people talk about it being so flooded, but I think I was listening to a podcast that was talking about how actually a lot of people within this last 2 to 5 years that were podcasting aren't podcasting anymore. So there's actually been more opportunities to come into this space with different ideas and different stories and, telling stories in a unique way. So that's definitely kind of one thing to really look at. And two is, as you know, Allie, podcasting, it's an easy from a production standpoint and from a, content and a value standpoint, but it's a lot of work.
Yes.
Like you do 3 podcasts. Like, how do you sleep? I don't know how you sleep. Yeah.
I do a lot of planning is what I do.
Hopefully you got some nice Google spreadsheets, workflows happening.
Yeah, I wish.
Well, I'm here to help you with that if you need.
Yes. I'm like, let's talk about this.
Yeah. but it is a lot of work. It's a commitment. And what I like to do with potential clients is really walk them through kind of what, if they've never done podcasting before, walk them through what it really looks like. Podcasting, doing one show can be, from a production side, anywhere from, maybe 10 to 15, 20 hours with multiple people on the team, really just dedicated to making this kind of content. And like podcasting is a long-term goal. You're not going to grow a podcast, unless you're a big media company or a big brand. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. And, you really have to kind of show potential clients and show people that don't know a whole lot about podcasting, the commitment. And like I said, I like to really sign people up in a package kind of scenario, because then, if they want to start a podcast, they have a commitment of doing 8 episodes. So we're going to help them produce, we're going to help them launch the podcast. And so I think that structure really works well, because I'm not getting the people that just do 2 episodes and then they're done. I want to work with people that understand. I want to work with people that understand the value in podcasting. I shouldn't have to sell podcasting to anybody.
That's one of my favorite statistics to go to. Is that the majority of podcasters don't make it past their 9th episode, because it is very much like you have to dedicate a lot of time, a lot of yourself, and a lot of effort towards podcasting. And that's something when I do podcast coaching, like the first step before we even get into like what gear you need or what you want to buy is the why. Why do you want to do this? Because if you don't have that passion and that fire and that, like the drive, then I don't want to say it's not going to work out for you, but you got to really know why, because it does take a lot of, you have to give a lot to do it. Yeah. There's a lot that goes into it.
It's a lot of output for us. I guess you're inputting a lot for a small amount of output.
Yeah.
A short amount of output. What do you tell clients? They call it, for folks out there that don't know what it is. It's called pod fade. It's like a term that's used for folks that are kind of burnt out or don't continue to produce their podcast after 9 episodes. What has worked for you? Because obviously you've worked with people and you've done a lot of podcasting.
Oh my gosh, turn the tables.
Yeah. Flipping the scripts, baby.
Well, I guess for clients, one thing I do with them is I have them sit down and brainstorm ideas, right? Write down 10, 20 ideas of topics that you would want to cover. And then let's break that down and start working on, I'm real big into outlines or scripts, just even if you don't follow them, it's just nice to have something to fall back to. And it doesn't work for everyone. I have a client right now who is almost too caught up on the script. The script has to be perfect and has to be finished before they can record. And, that's something that we're working on to get over. But I think if you can sit down and aim for 20 episodes in a season, if you want to do seasons, that's a good place to start. And then, start bringing it down from there, picking, do you want guests, figuring out that format and the structure, having all that laid out before you even, again, think about gear is so important, because those are the things that are going to keep you going. And you can have the best microphone in the world, but if you have nothing to talk about, what's the point?
It's going to be collecting dust.
Yeah. So that's what I do for clients. And then for myself, I just like to hear my own voice now. I think for me,
you're being very transparent, so that's great. Yeah.
For me personally, I've always been creative, and have always wanted to I'm kind of always been looking for a way to express myself. And I have a desire to like it's really funny because I said I have a hard time expressing my own emotions, but I want to make people feel, to have some type of feeling, whether that's happiness, whatever, sadness, through whatever I'm creating. Like I really just want to kind of make people feel as odd as that sounds. And so it's always been something I've tried to do, whether it's like through artwork or writing. I do a little bit of poetry, a little bit of writing on the side. And podcasting just seemed like I don't know, it just clicked. Like I was going through a really hard time mentally, like was really, really depressed and took a month and a half off from my job to just like try to get my mind right. Cause I was in probably like one of the darkest places I've been in a while, and started going to therapy for the first time, and like got medicated and kind of got my shit together a little bit. And I was like, I'm going to start a podcast that's all about re-engaging with my friends that I'd kind of cut myself off from, and experiencing new things, and just like really putting myself out there emotionally and, physically, like going out and actually engaging with the world, which is something else I'm not great at. And that's still the goal of the Fun with Friends podcast, is to try to inspire others to kind of to push themselves socially and emotionally, and to do the things that they've always been afraid of or have been putting off. And I kind of started it as a way of therapy for myself, I guess, and hopefully for others. And my other ones are kind of in that same realm, but in different ways. So yeah, that was a very long answer.
That's awesome. No, it's great to hear your story as well. Like, I mean, we're so lucky to have these outlets. Like, I think we were talking about that before, is, kind of our experiences in this last 16 months. I feel like, at least I can only speak for myself, but also have gone to some pretty dark places. I mean, I've never felt as isolated, which is just such an unnatural feeling for me, being such a social person and being a DJ, being out, like the life of the party, like, constantly interacting and engaging with people. And, just to kind of have that barrier. I mean, thank God for my dog, Puka. Like, she saved me during that time.
Yes.
But I'm glad you were able to find an outlet for that, because it's a very scary place to be in. And I'm glad that, or I should say, hopefully you're seeing a little bit more light, shine a bit more. So yeah.
100%. Yeah. Podcasting it's been really, I don't want to sound too cheesy, but I like to say it's been a very like transformational experience for me, because it has, like, I do have like social anxiety, and I'm a super awkward person. Like,
no, you're not.
Don't know if you could tell or not, but I feel like I'm super awkward and have anxiety, and, interactions aren't always like the easiest for me. And so through podcasting, it's helped with like confidence and being able to ask questions. Like, I never ever thought in the world like I'd ever have like an interview podcast. Blows my mind still when I think about it, that I do have 2 interview podcasts now. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you're kind of like currently working on, or that you have coming up that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I'm actually, a couple things that I can share that I'm really excited about is I'm currently kind of in the pre-production stage of producing a pilot episode for Out in Tech, which is a global LGBTQ plus community for people in the tech industry. And I approached them about actually producing audio content, and they weren't doing a podcast. And so I'm really excited that they were like, see what you can do, like put something together, So that's been exciting to kind of, rally the troops, basically, as you have to do as a producer, but the team is really great, and they're all really excited. And I think there's really a missing voice within the tech community, within our our community, but within the tech community specifically, where there needs to be a voice out there for these folks. With the DE&I initiatives in tech. It's a chance to share like what real good practices look like calling people out, calling these companies out that are just talking the talk and just not taking action. Not to go too much in the call out culture, but I think there needs to be representation, and I think there needs to be a voice there that isn't being heard. And obviously nobody's there saying anything, but it definitely needs to be heard. And I think we can be, help, and our allies need to be able to really listen. So that's kind of one project. And then actually I had dinner with a colleague last night, and he kind of pitched this idea to me that wasn't necessarily like podcast related, but it was more of an audio experience around music. And I won't go into too much detail around the specific idea, but it was a really cool concept around kind of like the intersection of nature and music. Yes. And how to create these kind of a global experience around DJs and music, and integrating nature into this audio and potentially kind of visual experience. And man, that got my mind going last night. I was really excited. He's a very talented guy and has been in brand and marketing for a really long time. And, those are the kind of projects that, is something different. But again, it's kind of these projects that are deeply connected to, what I believe in. I believe in DJing and what it does to people, and what kind of joy and happiness it brings to myself, but to others, but where the inspiration comes from music and nature. So maybe by the time this episode actually gets released, I'll be like in full production and on those two projects.
I could talk to you about nature and music for hours. Like, oh my gosh, that's another conversation.
Yeah.
But
that's our second interview.
Yes. We'll just talk about nature and music because
totally.
My Lord. And then the pre-production that you're working on, it's out in tech. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Awesome.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm pumped for that. I'm going to keep my eyes out because I definitely want to listen. I cannot thank you enough, Leah, for being on the podcast. This has been absolutely wonderful. And like I kind of mentioned, it's a different type of conversation around creativity, but that passion and the passion to create is still there, and it is such an important factor when it comes to audio and developing these stories and telling other people's stories. I can't thank you enough for being on. Like, I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm just happy to be here, and I'm glad that we're actually connected and had some real connection time for your podcast. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Definitely. And where can people find you, like on the net or social media? Is there a good place for folks to reach out?
Yeah. We'd love to connect on social. At this point right now, we're mainly on Instagram. You can follow us. We have our handle is at Puka Puka Create is our handle. So hit us up, connect with us. If you're looking to tell your story, hit us up. Hit Allie up too, because she's wonderful. Her company's wonderful also. And our website is pukapukacreative.com also.
Awesome. Again, thanks so much for being on the pod, and might have to have you on for future episodes to chat a bit more.
I'm down.
And listeners, be sure to like, rate, and review the podcast. If you have questions for me or for any of my guests, including Leah, you can text or call us on our hotline. It's 252-419-6004. And we'll answer those questions on a future episode of the podcast. And you can, of course, also follow us on Instagram at wandering_creative_.
This has been a Coots Creations production. Follow the show on Instagram at wandering_creative_ and on Twitter at wandering_pod. For more information, go to cootscreations.com. Like, rate, review, and subscribe. To sponsor the Wandering Creatives podcast, visit www.cootscreations.com/podcast-sponsorship-opportunities. You can also click the link in the episode description below. To be a guest or a featured maker on the podcast, click the link in our Instagram bio or contact us at cootscreationsllc@gmail.com.